Hey you, if you're enjoying the podcast, do us a favor and go into your podcast app right now and tap the subscribe button so you never miss another episode. And if you're into reading, go to weirdtruecrime.com to get written versions of the cases we cover on the show, along with extra visual content. All the fun happens on social media, so come talk to us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at our handle @weirdtruecrime. And I know it's a giant pain, but it would mean the world to us if you would take 2 minutes to leave us a rating and review. We'll be sure to give you a shout out on future episodes.
Darkcast Network. The light shines brightest on our indie podcasts.
Hey y'all, I'm Gina.
And I'm Amber.
And welcome back to Weird True Crime.
The holidays are fast approaching. I swear it was Halloween only 2 days ago, and now we're at Thanksgiving with Christmas waving maniacally around the corner. Thanksgiving was always one of my favorites growing up because food. Green bean casserole has a special place in my heart, and it always will. You can keep your yams and your sweet potatoes away from me, though. Thanks.
You are crazy. Sweet potato casserole is the best, and you just haven't had mine. And I promise I can change your mind.
Maybe. You'll have to put your money where your mouth is there.
Okay, I'll bring you some leftovers this year.
Okay. What are your other favorite dishes?
You know, I really do love green bean casserole, but the rest of my family is kind of over it. So I know. So we've moved away from it a little bit. So we just do like fresh green beans, and then my brother's really into Brussels sprouts, so he makes a good Brussels sprout side. And dressing, my mom's dressing, stuffing will always be my favorite. And yes, she has been telling me in recent years that I need to learn how to make it, which is terrifying and way too much responsibility because she doesn't have a recipe. She just eyeballs it and like tastes it and figures it out as she goes. So yeah, I'm dreading trying to take that torch, but it's going to happen at some point.
Dear God, I think our moms were cloned there.
Oh, really?
100%. My mom has a dressing stuffing recipe that she got from her mom that there's nothing written down anywhere. It's all locked in the vault. And if she doesn't pass it on to me, then it doesn't go any further. And she has been telling me for years, Amber, I need to show you how to make the stuffing. She tried to show me a couple of Thanksgivings ago, but I can tell you there's cornbread involved. That's about it.
Yeah. I don't even know that much.
I'm terrified. We can go through the terrifying journey together.
Okay. But you know their recipes aren't the same.
No. It's just we'll be there for moral support.
I'll be like, how did yours turn out this year?
Exactly. Do you have any other special Thanksgiving traditions?
Not really. I'm also responsible for buttermilk pie.
Yes.
So
you are the buttermilk pie queen.
Thank you. Yes, I have been dubbed the buttermilk pie maker, and I probably will be for the remainder of time. So yes. I was going to make just one, but maybe I'll make two for extras to give to people who want it because it is really delicious. What about you? What are your like must-haves or main traditions?
So the weird thing was, before I was pregnant, I could not stand cranberries. Cranberry sauce, like that weird canned jelly substance that everyone seems to love. Like regular cranberry recipes, I love cranberries. Don't get me wrong. Cranberries are rocking, but eating it for Thanksgiving, I couldn't do it. But since I had Natasha, give me those cranberries.
Really?
Yes. I made sure Patrick got some cranberries at the store because I have to have some in my face.
What kind do you like? Do you like the jellied kind that you slice, or do you like more of like the cranberry with the actual pieces? All of it?
All of it. I'll eat it all.
Wow. It's so weird how pregnancy changes your taste like that so much. Like, I used to hate peanut butter and now I love it. So yeah, pregnancy does weird things to your taste buds. I'm glad you've come to the dark side on the cranberries though. They're pretty amazing.
I'm happy to be here. Well, other than forcing myself into a food-induced coma, the only thing I like to do on Thanksgiving is set up the Christmas tree.
Heck yeah.
I know a lot of other people may have already had their tree up, or they like to do it like the first day of November or something like that. But I like to make the fat man wait his turn until I'm at least digesting the turkey.
100% the same in this household.
This year will be interesting, though. I have a wall of snakes instead of any kind of place for a tree. So I'm going to have to feng shui some stuff in order to get one set up, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I am looking at the snakes behind you right now and really wondering where you can put that tree. Maybe like a tabletop tree, or is it like...
I may have to take like a corner of like my little podcasting area over here and it's going to be tree corner. We'll see.
You'll make it work. I believe in you.
I'll wizard something. This time of year, it is common for families to travel far and wide to be together for the special days ahead. Lots of laughter and joy can be found. Unfortunately, it's not always joyous. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking right now. Such is the case that we are going to be going over today.
Let's travel over to Jupiter, Florida, a suburb of West Palm Beach, about 55 miles north of Miami, with a population of around 60,000. Located on the ocean side, Jupiter is considered a relatively safe town with beautiful views and warm temperatures. On November 26, 2009, on Thanksgiving Day, Jim and Muriel Sitton, along with their 6-year-old daughter, Makayla, opened up their home to their extended family and hosted Thanksgiving dinner. They had invited around 16 people to come that day, which included Michael and Carol Merhige, Lisa Knight, who was expecting her first child with her husband Patrick, Carla Merhige, Lisa's twin sister, and Muriel's mother, Raymonde Joseph. Just before dinner, the doorbell rang, and standing there was 35-year-old Paul Michael Merhige. Everyone was surprised to see him, as he hadn't really attended family events in the past. It had been about a decade since Jim and Muriel had last seen him, but he was family, so they welcomed him with open arms. Tables were set up both inside and outside. Everyone was chatting, playing games together, and just having a good time. Makayla had written cards about how thankful she was for her family and strung them up on a clothesline. After everyone was stuffed with the usual Thanksgiving fare, the family began one of their yearly traditions, a holiday sing-along. It was especially fun for Makayla, as she had a school performance of the Nutcracker the following day, and the sing-along eventually morphed into an impromptu dress rehearsal for her. She had begged her parents to let her stay awake a little while longer, and they made a deal with her that after singing, it would be time for bed. Finally, around 10 p.m., Muriel tucked Makayla into bed. The rest of the family was in the kitchen, loading up leftovers for everyone to take home with them. Patrick Knight told Paul goodbye, to which Paul responded, "Why don't you stay a little while longer?" It was at this point that Muriel and Jim heard something disturbing: gunshots. One of their family members had opened fire inside of their home. It took seconds for neighbors to start calling 911 to report gunshots and screaming coming from the residence. Upon arrival, authorities discovered a gruesome scene. Some family members were still cowering in bushes for protection, afraid the shooter would return.
So who was the shooter? Well, it turns out that the surprise guest, Paul Michael Merhige, had nonchalantly left the gathering right after dinner to retrieve a gun from his car. He returned back to the house while the festivities were winding down and opened fire. He first shot and killed his twin sisters, Carla and Lisa. Then he turned the gun on his brother-in-law, Patrick Knight. The bullet ripped through Patrick's stomach and he ended up surviving, but spent 3 months in the hospital in a medically induced coma. The doctors and nurses attending him were unsure if he would live or not. 52-year-old Clifford Gabara was also shot, but thankfully the bullet had only grazed him. Paul continued his rampage, turning the gun on his 76-year-old aunt, Raymonde Joseph, shooting her in the shoulder. Her husband attempted to stop the excessive bleeding and crouched next to her on the floor beside her. Paul came closer and shot his aunt one more time, shooting her in the chest before he turned the gun to his uncle and shot twice. Fortunately for his uncle, the gun didn't fire the 2 times he pulled the trigger. When Paul turned away, his uncle heard him mutter, "I've been waiting 20 years to do this." During the chaos, Paul made his way up to Makayla's bedroom where she was sleeping and shot the little girl 3 times before he exited the room. Her mother, Muriel, recalled seeing the shadow of him walking through the 2nd floor of the house and then hearing 3 gunshots while she cowered on the back porch. Muriel could do nothing but scream. Makayla was shot in the back, her hip, and in the head. Later, the family speculated that Paul targeted Makayla due to all the praise and attention she had received during the singing after dinner. She was only a few days away from turning 7. After killing Makayla, Paul fled the home.
It was hard because we had been doing all this research and we were seeing different information about what happened that day. And a lot of the articles were saying that Paul went into the bedroom and shot her and then left and then turned around and went back and shot her again. But when I was watching the documentary that actually had Jim and Muriel in it, where they were doing interviews, she talked about what was going on and what happened in that moment, and her recalling that she had escaped through the laundry room and garage to the back porch where other family members were hiding, and that she looked up and saw him upstairs walking into Makayla's room and then heard the gunshots. And there was nothing she could do at that point but just stand there and listen. So who was Paul Merhige? As a teen, he was an honor roll student and a varsity athlete. On his senior page in his yearbook, he wrote a touching tribute to all 32 members of his family, stating, "I love you now and will forever," which is kind of a weird thing for a teenager to write in his yearbook, especially along with all of the other pages of people just saying, "Hey, I'm so glad I'm done with this. Time to move on to the real world." And here he was writing this very touching tribute to his sisters, saying how much he loved being their big brother and how much he loved his parents and the rest of his family. So it was a very strange thing to write, especially considering how the story ends up. So
it's almost like he was overcompensating for actual resentment that he had for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good way to put it, actually. According to a former classmate, he was handsome and fit, driven and mature, personable but quiet. He was a kicker on the football team, which isn't something that was taught at practice, so he would practice on his own. He had plans to attend the University of Miami and become a doctor. He was remembered for having a lighter side and would joke about being afraid of losing his hair. He even began using Rogaine as a teen to try and prevent becoming bald later. So it sounds like he was a pretty normal guy who had a lot of ambition and great things ahead of him. He had a super supportive family who could afford to send him to a very top-tier private school. And he had everything going for him. But it sounds like even as a teenager, he had his own insecurities and was already worried about balding and other issues that he may have down the line, which is normal.
He sounded like a typical teenager.
After he graduated from high school, he attended the University of Miami, just like he had hoped to. To all his friends and family and those around him, he seemed completely normal on the surface, like we were saying. According to Paul's mother, he had a mental breakdown at the age of 19 while in his honors program in college. It was then that he began suffering from severe depression and obsessive compulsive disorder. After college, things began to take an even sharper turn. In 1998, he was arrested by Miami-Dade PD for disorderly conduct. We're unsure of the exact charge, but a friend described him as mentally troubled at that point. He wasn't able to hold a job due to his mental health, so his parents supported him financially. His parents were unable to care for him properly while he was living in their home, or so they said, so they paid for him to have a condo in Miami, Florida. Them not wanting him in their home anymore made him feel very slighted and angry for putting him out, which added to his negative feelings toward his family, which is completely understandable. But it seems like even at this point, they may have felt uncomfortable with him in their home and decided it was for the best if he had his own place to live and wasn't under their roof anymore, which is a little alarming in itself. So after he was put into this condo in Miami on his own and feeling slighted and probably a little abandoned, his mental health continued to spiral, and he suffered from insomnia and began putting on a large amount of weight. He would repeatedly bathe, taking 2-hour-long showers. He also shaved constantly and struggled to make decisions and routinely skipped his medicine. He had a history of violence. He once shot himself in a suicide attempt. In the early 2000s, he requested a restraining order against one of his sisters, saying she had threatened to kill him, but he dropped the request a few weeks later. In 2006, his sister Carla requested a restraining order saying that he had threatened to kill her by cutting her throat and then kill himself, but then she dropped it a few weeks later. So we already have a very strange history beginning to build between him and his family members at this point. Let's take a minute to talk about this mental break that he had in college and a little more about how that could come about. According to Kevin Beaver, a professor at Florida State University, mental illness often comes out during the college years. Pre-existing conditions can be triggered by drastic life changes or stressors, and sometimes those different mental disorders can feed into violence. The change in mindset is usually gradual, triggered by a real or perceived slight. His breakdown could have led him to feel inferior to his sisters, jealous of their success, and his inability to achieve his own goals due to his mental distress. Narcissistic personality disorder often leads people to believe they should be better than others, and watching his sisters succeed while he did not was probably a huge challenge for him, which makes a lot of sense given the mental issues that he was going through. He was also resentful of having to live off of his parents and not being able to take care of himself. His OCD, whether it was perceived or real as it had been diagnosed by a doctor, it gives him reason to keep turning to those resentments over and over in his mind. And over time, those feelings turn violent. He begins thinking, what if I kill them? And then this thought crosses his mind often enough that it moves to the forefront, and then the actual planning begins. The when, where, and how. He may not have been sure that he was going to go through with the killings that Thanksgiving, but he knew that he would be ready.
Now that you've said all of that, it makes more sense that he went after Makayla. Because that night with the sing-along, she was the center of attention. Everybody was enjoying her performance, fawning over her, and he wanted that.
He wanted to be the center of attention. He wanted that love and adoration. And so because she was this light that everyone
gravitated to.
Yeah, he wanted to snuff that out.
In the weeks leading up to the shooting, he spent over $2,000 on at least 4 different firearms and ammo in 2 different shops where security footage actually placed him there. At one of the shops, he asked if there was a way to attach a scope to a Remington 700 rifle he was purchasing because he was going to be going hunting. I used my air quotes pretty hard there. Paul also withdrew $12,000 out of his bank account and retrieved his passport from his mother. He purchased a cover to go over his car as well. Leading up to the dinner, he had asked his parents what their plans were, specifically about the dinner, at Jim and Muriel's, making sure to find out exactly what time and who would be there. 2 days after the shooting, on Saturday, prosecutors issued a warrant for his arrest, accusing him of 4 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder for shooting Patrick Knight and Clifford Gabarra, and a bolo was put out for his blue 2007 Toyota Camry. The police offered a $100,000 reward for information on his whereabouts. The family were basically held as hostages in their home by authorities to keep them safe in case Paul came back to hurt more people. Jim and Muriel weren't even allowed to go to the hospital to see their daughter because they were considered evidence of a crime scene. Investigators didn't find him, but searched his residence for any clues about where he could have gone. Flyers were put up in multiple languages in the hopes that someone would spot him. Due to Paul's unknown whereabouts, the family were not allowed to hold funerals for their family members where they wanted to. They were asked to have the service at the local high school because it was the easiest place for police to protect. The Sittons were told to put curtains over their windows because Paul had a scope on his gun that would allow him to aim through their windows.
Could you imagine not being able to leave your home because your family member could come back and try to kill more of you?
You would essentially feel like you're being hunted.
Yeah. I mean, he was going hunting. So here you are stuck in your home where your daughter and other family members were brutally murdered.
And being hunted by your deranged family member. I can only imagine how many times afterwards they asked why.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Mm-hmm. Being scared to walk past a doorway or a window for fear that he could be standing there waiting for an opportunity.
No, can't even begin to comprehend what that would have been like to have to go through. Paul Michael Marriage was finally picked up by federal agents in the Florida Keys on January 2nd, 2010, 38 days after the shooting. His family endured 38 days of basic house arrest and constant fear for their lives. His arrest occurred only a few hours after he was featured on America's Most Wanted, and a viewer, I think it was the owner or the management of the Edgewater Lodge, recognized Paul's vehicle and called in the tip. Paul had reportedly checked into the Edgewater Lodge in Florida's Middle Keys on December 2nd, 2009, under the name John Baca. In a news release from the U.S. Marshals, they said Paul had paid a cash advance of 2 weeks on a second-floor room in the motel, presumably using some of the $12,000 he had withdrawn before the shootings. He also covered his blue Camry with a car cover and had switched the tag with another car he owned in 2006, a 1991 Lexus. After the police received the tip, they raced over to the hotel to verify the tip was legit and proceeded with extreme caution as they knew he was armed. And they found Paul in his room on his computer. Thankfully, he was taken into custody without incident. America's Most Wanted cameras were on scene when the police took Paul into custody, giving him the opportunity to say the following to the camera. Quote, 18 years, I've been tormented. I've had chronic medical problems, mental problems. It's been a nightmare. I didn't even know what I was doing. It was the only thing I could do. I went several times to turn myself in. I was waiting for my parents to maybe make a statement and tell me to turn myself in. I didn't know what to do. And today, right now, watching on TV, my cousin, I didn't know. I didn't know what to do. I just can't believe I've done all this. I just can't believe it. End quote.
Prosecutors wanted to put together a story of what happened that day of the shooting. A forensic psychologist said he absolutely chose Thanksgiving to go through with his fantasy because he wanted to tarnish the happy holiday that his family usually had. Family members in attendance said he seemed relatively normal that day, but they did note that he didn't eat anything during the meal. During the singing and other festivities, he sat to the side and he didn't participate. He didn't like watching Makayla get all of the attention that he felt was rightfully his, which is what Amber had stated earlier. He got up and walked through the group to go outside, which Jim Sitton, Makayla's father, thought was kind of rude, but he figured he went outside to smoke a cigarette or something else. As we now know, he was actually going to his car to get the gun he brought with him. Psychologists also say that he spared his parents because he wanted to punish them for the expectations they put on him by injuring and killing their relatives. So he wanted his parents to see their loved ones die. Knowing that he had thought all of that out, there's no way that you can sit there and say that his mental illnesses inhibited him from thinking clearly.
Because he clearly thought this out.
Mm-hmm. On October 27, 2011, Paul pleaded guilty to the murder of his 4 relatives, avoiding a possible death sentence after reaching a plea deal with prosecutors. Palm Beach County Circuit Judge Joseph Marks sentenced him to 7 consecutive life terms, telling him, "You'll never see the light of day."
I love that line.
I know, and it's well-deserved. So, way to go, Judge Marks. As part of that plea agreement with prosecutors, he had to agree to waive any rights of appeal, which I love, and I'm so glad they did that, because not only is it a pain for the courts, the family members have to go relive that every single time.
Exactly.
He was up for appeal. And I'm so glad that they don't have to do that.
Yep.
Patrick Knight, Lisa's husband, was happy with the plea agreement, and he was quoted saying he didn't want to endure 20 years of appeals, which is exactly
what you just said.
What I just said. However, Jim Sitton, Makayla's father, wanted Marriage to go on trial and potentially face the death penalty. He had urged the judge to delay sentencing so he could prepare a proper presentation with an attorney. The start of the trial had been scheduled for January, and Marriage's public defenders had filed court documents expressing their intent to defend him using an insanity defense. However, after the court proceeding, State Attorney Michael McAuliffe released a statement in which he said that after careful evaluation and consideration, he decided to accept Paul's plea as he determined it was an appropriate resolution to the case, which I agree, because if he had done the insanity defense and had been acquitted, that would have been an awful outcome for everyone involved.
There's no happy ending here, period, because 4 lives were lost. But at least, as the judge said, he will never see the light of day. He will never set foot out of there. And so the rest of the family can at least live with that security, that they're not going to have to deal
with his
that
crazy ass coming after them again.
Yep.
In some way, shape, or form.
Yep.
So at least they have that.
Jim and Muriel Sitton still live in the house where the murders occurred. They welcomed 2 more daughters in 2012 and 2014, Natalia and Ryla. I immediately wondered why they would stay in the same house all these years after the murders, which is a question they have gotten many times over the years as well. Jim Sitton said that one awful night doesn't erase the years of happiness they spent with Makayla in the home. I can see that, but I don't know that I'd have the strength to stay myself.
No, especially knowing that one of their daughters sleeps in the same room that she was in.
Jim and Muriel ended up filing a negligence suit against Paul Marriage's parents, stating that not only did they know he was going to come that day, but they had some concern that he was a threat and didn't do anything to stop it or tell anyone. Carol Marriage, Paul's mother, had written an email to a relative prior to Thanksgiving saying, "Everyone is going up, including Paul. It will be interesting to say the least." She had even said to Lisa, who was killed during the shooting, "I hope he doesn't come and kill us all tonight." Lisa had replied, "Mom, it came to my mind, but don't say that to Dad, because Dad would get upset that we had such ideas." Jim had compared Paul to a wild animal, stating, "If someone brought a known dangerous pit bull or rattlesnake into your house and it killed people, wouldn't you want them to be held accountable?" If they knew, if they were having these worries or suspicions, you don't think your kid is going to follow through with anything. So even if they had these thoughts, that's probably him actually going through and committing these murders was the last thing on their mind that they thought that he would do. So it's hard to say that they should be held accountable. Plus, he was a grown-ass man. He made his own decisions on his own.
100%.
But I do see where Jim's coming from. If you bring someone or something into your house that you know is a threat and something happens, they were the ones that brought him there. They should pay. So I can see both sides, but it's not really on them. And the judge thought the same thing because the lawsuit was dismissed in March 2012. In a strange turn of events, Michael and Carol Merhige filed their own counter lawsuit against the Sittons, claiming wrongful death and defamation. In a statement released by their attorney, they only filed the counter lawsuit because, quote, Jim Sitton has chosen to make unfair and untrue statements about Michael and Carol Merhige, which has added unnecessarily to their anguish and suffering, end quote. Michael and Carol claimed the Sittons were well aware of Paul's mental health issues and any potential danger and allowed him into their home anyway. Muriel Sitton's father, a doctor who treated Paul for his mental health issues throughout the years, had expressed his concerns that Paul may hurt someone and had even refused to let him attend a family function in his home. I wasn't able to find what the outcome of the counter lawsuit was. I don't think that it amounted to anything either.
No, I don't think it did. Something we discovered while researching was that 8 months after Makayla died, she actually became a published author. One day, Muriel recorded Makayla telling a story she made up called The Bear's Castle. An artist by the name of Tyler Hollis, who had lost her own daughter 4 years before, offered to illustrate the story. The Bear's Castle is a tale about a little bear who builds a castle and befriends a unicorn. 100% something you would imagine a 6-year-old talking about. Tyler mentioned that the hardest part about illustrating the story was listening to Makayla's little voice tell the story. Included in the illustrations are the pink and purple bedroom Makayla loved, as well as her quilt, some hand-drawn pictures, and the cross necklace that she hung on her bedside lamp. Inside the book cover is a design Makayla actually created herself. Muriel and Jim Sitton hosted a story time and book signing for their release where they played the recording of Makayla telling the story. They also had students from Florida Classical Ballet perform, and Makayla's piano teacher from the Jupiter Academy of Music sang a song she wrote for Makayla called Forever Friends. Proceeds from the book, which had an accompanying CD of her narrative, went to the Makayla Joy Sitton Foundation, which provides children's music and dance scholarships, and that leads us to Grace Notes Music Foundation. Here is their About Me information taken straight from their website. Quote, founded in 2010, the Grace Notes Music Foundation began as an outreach program of the Jupiter Academy of Music, whose purpose was the administration of the Makayla Joy Sitton Music Scholarships. Named after a joyful, talented music student who loved to play the piano, the scholarships were a way of honoring the life of Makayla. Her family wanted to continue her legacy and love of music by making music lessons possible for children in need. In September of 2011, the Makayla Joy Sitton Music Scholarships were born, and the Grace Notes Music Foundation received its 501c3 designation. The Grace Notes Music Foundation has a bright future and a vision for growth in the years to come, with adding more scholarships and reaching more children in the community. Building on the cornerstone of our organization, the Makayla Joy Sitton Music Scholarships, the foundation continues to fund music scholarships and community outreach programs to children in need.
While it's sad something so tragic happened, it's wonderful something so lovely came out of it to help her legacy live on and help spread her joy and passion for music even after her death. I looked up the book on Amazon. It's available. You can buy it on Amazon. And it is just so stinking precious. And I can't imagine what that means to her family to be able to hold on to that and to be able to continue to hear her little voice. When I was reading earlier about all of this, they noted that the Jim and Muriel's 2 daughters now, they know that Makayla had existed. They knew that they had a sister, but they've kind of shielded them from really what happened. So there's some really precious pictures there was a Facebook group for the scholarship that had a picture of Makayla's gravestone and one of her sisters sitting there. It's so precious.
what a gift to have that recording of her to be able to have always.
Yep.
And to play for her sisters so they can know her voice and who she was. That is so touching, and I'm glad that they got to honor her in that way and that something good came out of it. It always really amazes me when parents go through such tragedy but find a way to use their grief to help others.
Because like I said earlier, I don't know how I would have been able to handle it. And for anybody that doesn't know, my daughter, I know that I've mentioned her before. My daughter's name is Makayla, and it's spelled exactly how their daughter's name. So when I'm reading this, it was real hard, really, really hard to see her name repeatedly in this story. I don't know how, like I said earlier, I don't know how they did it, because I don't know what I would do.
And the fact that they decided to honor her by giving her siblings and teaching them about her and honoring her legacy in that way just goes to show how strong they are.
Yep.
So yeah, that's the horrible case of the Jupiter, Florida Thanksgiving murders. And I'm sure it's exactly what you wanted to listen to as you prepare your Thanksgiving feast. So you're welcome for such a downer. But we are called Weird True Crime, and that's why we're here. We do hope that you all have a wonderful holiday, no matter how you choose to celebrate. And until next time, stay safe.
Make good choices.
Bye.
Bye.